Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and in today's session, we're going to continue the HIVE CMS Admin Learning Series, learning how to use some advanced search filtering. Now, as always, of course, our webinars are recorded, and you'll be able to review this a little later on, and also, as always, we keep an eye on the questions window during the live webinar. And so if you have questions about today's topic, we encourage you to throw them in the questions window. And if you are watching this as a recording and you want to interact with us live, we encourage you to take a look at our events on our ctcsoftware.com website to get signed up for future events. You can interact with us live while we present this stuff. So what are we covering today? Well, I mean, in HIVE, and pretty much in any system for that matter, sometimes basic filtering just isn't enough for us. And HIVE has some pretty good basic filtering tools, and they're pretty powerful, and we use those a lot, especially end users leverage those. But at times, especially as BIM managers and sort of content managers, CAD managers, we need more. We need a bit more advanced of filtration sometimes. And so the filter panel does have an advanced set of controls. This really helps with some of these more admin-specific criteria, and sometimes this is actually even usable by end users, maybe covertly. You might save some searches and give them the benefits of some of those advanced things without letting them know that they're getting the benefits of those advanced things, or not obvious, I should say. So we're going to discuss today a lot of those advanced searching controls. We're going to talk about how this can be beneficial to you, and again, how you can potentially even use these with some of your end users to make your searching and their searching as efficient as is possible. So we're going to cover a couple of specific topics today. We're going to go over the advanced filter criteria, like what is available in advanced filtration. We're going to use those advanced filters to better understand corporate content. Like we're going to go through and kind of give some examples of why you might use this. We're also going to be saving some of our searches, or talking about saving our searches, so you can make this repeatable, more usable over time. And we're going to talk about potentially how you might, again, leverage these with end users to round out their searching by using the advanced options, perhaps a little bit covertly, if we want to call it like that. Since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, I'm going to jump in live, and we're going to start right away by identifying the advanced filtering criteria that's available inside the HIVE CMS. Now, if you want to follow along with me today, I encourage you to do that. You can certainly have your HIVE open. I'm going to be using exclusively the CMS throughout today's discussion, so you can do exactly the same things I'm doing if you're an admin. Well, actually, even if you're not an admin, I suppose as a daily Revit user, you can leverage these as well. It's just more commonly done by admins. So I have the HIVE CMS pulled up over here. I'll just kind of have this so we're seeing advanced filtering here on screen. And in the HIVE CMS, I'm just going to run some kind of a basic search. Maybe I run a search for single, if I could spell, and see what shows up here. So when this runs this search, it's going to find me, in my case, 470 objects. It's loading 25 at a time, and it's running the search for single, and it finds me some results. You guys are already all probably familiar about using library filtration to get to a specific library. We'll use that a little later. You might have been using tags. You might be updating your sorting, exclusively filtering down to Revit content exclusively. Or perhaps if you're an AutoCAD user, you might be focusing exclusively on the AutoCAD content and filtering for just that, so you're not getting any other results outside of that design app. And within those two different major sets of filtration here, you may very well be leveraging some of the specific filters there, like in the case of Revit, categorical filters, display units, versioning of content, or in the AutoCAD side, the categorical filters there. And you've probably already noticed that as you hit one of these only such and such an app's content, it automatically collapses the other design app. If I uncheck that, then the other design app maybe opens up. If I check it, and in this case, then Revit collapses. And you can't even open it up when that's the case, because you're exclusively saying, only give me back AutoCAD content. So all the Revit filters in that case, or the other design apps filters, in this case, AutoCAD, would be ignored because they're no longer relevant. So that's all well and good. But what about the other option? That's at the very bottom. that most people just leave collapsed all the time? Well, that's the focus of today's topic, and that's the advanced filters that are available down here. So let's identify what filters are available and what this might mean for your filtration. There's Revit extensions, or file extensions rather, not Revit extensions exclusively. It's file extensions for any kind of file type that's in your system. Those file extensions will be listed here, and you can filter exclusively for them. This can be very useful for building up, for example, material library filters if you were looking for the material assets and not the actual material definitions themselves. You could leverage this by only pulling out image file formats. Or maybe you're looking for, say, standards, and you don't want DOCXs to show up or DOCs to show up, but only PDFs. You could potentially filter for just that, or HTML files, or whatever your file type is that's for your standards. So you can leverage these file extensions. There's also things like an added date filter for start and for end. So you can kind of have a range of dates if you're looking for things added within this particular time frame. This can be useful for that. Below that one, there is an updated range here for updated at start date, updated at end date, and then there's also a field down here, 2 fields for added by a discrete user or updated by a discrete user. And so all of these, when you combine them together as a BIM manager or a CAD manager or content manager, this really can help you ask some extra questions of the content that exists here and filter down for specific things. There's a lot of different reasons why you might use this. So let's talk now about using some of these advanced filters. Let's go through a couple of examples of why you might be interested in this. So there's 2 kind of major reasons why I personally use this, and this is what I'm going to highlight today, is why I choose to leverage these filters in the way that I do. And you might have other use cases yourself. Actually, there's 3 major reasons. I mentioned one of them already, which would be like isolating material assets by using file extension specific filtration. So perhaps I do things like .pat files for the patterns. Maybe I include in that JPEGs or PNG files. Up to you. You can certainly check those types of things. And then and maybe bitmaps here I don't have any BMPs. Okay, so if I reapply this, let's get rid of this search here and just search asterisk in this case. If I reapply this, I'm going to start getting back those types of items exclusively. Apparently somebody had preview images that they processed into my library in addition to the actual assets, interestingly enough. So I have the ability to filter for those items and to have them then represent on screen. In my case, I'm getting 25 at a time and 141 total items found. You leverage that. It's real easy. Simple filtration there. Even though it's in the advanced filters, it might be meaningful for you. Now, I'm going to clear that out, and let's talk about some of these other ones down here. I sometimes am interested when things were added to my library or when they were updated, and I often focus most on updating. First, though, let's take a look at something here, added by. There's times when I hire new team members or I add new team members to my content list, and I want to kind of keep an eye on what maybe they're adding into the library, just so I can make sure that stuff is quality. And so maybe I use their name out of the management portal. I may have found what their display name was, and I can simply copy that and use that right here. For example, one of my team members is actually one of my developers in this case, and I don't necessarily want their content in my main libraries up here. So maybe I'm looking through all of my libraries. Let's use my corporate libraries here, the ones that are labeled CTCE here. So, and the ones that are my MEP content, my standards, not my staging library. That one's probably fine. But let's just see if there's any content in any of those libraries that was added by this particular user. And so in this case, look at that. There's actually a few pieces of content that were added by this individual. Now, it's entirely possible that they were added at one point by them in the staging library, and then they were moved to the correct library, which means they maybe were updated by somebody. So let's actually check to see the last time this user updated any of that content. Same exact stuff. So I'm gonna cut this out of the list. Let's Control X. I'm gonna paste it down here, and I'm doing this because maybe there was content that was added by one of us on the BIM management team, but this other user happened to have had rights to update it, and they've updated that content since. And maybe I want to identify that stuff as well so we can take some actions. In this case, it looks like there's nothing that was updated by this user that's in any of my corporate libraries. That's good to know. But let's just clear this out and see if there's any content from them anywhere that's been updated by them last. And it looks like there actually is. There's some content that's in here, perhaps for the purpose of testing, and they've added this into a particular library. And so if that's the case, maybe I want to know a bit more about that. Maybe I want to know what libraries it's in. So perhaps I start showing things like a list view here, and I can see that these are both in a staging library, and maybe this is something that I should be taking some actions on. The nice thing is that I have the ability to filter by specific users, and I find that very meaningful to figure out what content is in my corporate library publicly that maybe was added by somebody who it shouldn't have been originally added by, or was maybe last updated by a user who perhaps shouldn't have had rights to do that, or maybe I want to verify their work if maybe they're a good user, but I just want to make sure that the quality of work is up to our corporate standard. I can find that out and find out who's adding stuff and where it is. If you actually expand out the details on a piece of content, you can actually see a bit more, like, for example, if I want to know who added it and who updated it last, and when that was. In this case, it was added by and last updated by the same user on the same day at the same time, because it was just added once. And if you add it, you are, if no one else has touched it, the last person to have updated it as well. And I can see some of the other properties about this piece of content as well. In the details. So details can be nice and meaningful here as a good add-on to these advanced filters, depending on what your intent is in this space. So let's take a look at another use case. There's plenty of times, let's get rid of this username here. There's plenty of times when looking through my library of content, there's stuff that hasn't been touched in quite a while. And maybe I want to make an action plan for getting that content more up to date. Now, I can use a date picker here if I want to. Say I want to look for anything that hasn't been updated since January 1st of 2020. And I can apply this, and it will find me, let me just change this back to details view, all of the content that hasn't been touched since then by anybody. In my case, there's 722 items in my library that haven't been updated or touched in any form or fashion in this case now over 3 years. And so perhaps I want to know that so I can take some action on this stuff and maybe see what the uses of this content is, which again, I can see from details. I can also understand perhaps, what the content is and maybe take and process it through some stuff. This stuff's probably pretty old. It might have been 2018 content. I don't know. And so maybe I want to make an action plan to go fix a lot of this stuff that might be really out of date so that my team is actually using quality content that is up to my current standard. So you as admins, you may very well leverage things like this updated end date and figure out when content was last touched. And you can combine that with who last updated something or who last added or first added something. And so, you can kind of use that in your filtration. So these are the ones that are really advanced things that I typically don't necessarily leverage with end users. But let's talk about how we can leverage this with saved searches, because this can be really meaningful. If we want to implement this and reuse these same things over and over again, I don't want to have to keep remembering exactly what I set up over here. Maybe today I make a search that looks for this particular updated end date, and maybe I have this saved as a filter for myself for old content. So maybe this is my old content for investigation. And then, as I go through that process, I can maybe take that content, find it, reprocess it, or maybe I delete it from my library completely. And then as I'm coming back to this repeatedly, if I save this, maybe I'm running other search filters for other reasons to do other stuff throughout the day, and I can very easily come right back to this search that is the old content for investigation. It's my own search. Now, probably would be wise to have a better naming convention than what I'm using here, but this is certainly something that you can leverage. I would typically prefix these with like a Z underscore to make sure that's at the bottom of my list, so it's not like in my prominent early stuff that most, I might share with other people. But I can run that search real quick, and now it'll go and run that filter for me and go get that type of content. Another thing that you might use this for here is file extension filtration. So I mentioned before Now, if I wanted to implement this in a way that maybe affects all of the other users on my team, maybe I want to have a file extension inclusion here for those materials that I was mentioning. Maybe the patterns, the PNGs. I don't know if I have any other formats that are image-based inside of here. But maybe I want to leverage this kind of content, or maybe I want to filter exclusively for .dyn Dynamo routine files if I'm storing Dynamo routines inside of here. So up here then, if I wanted to say, well, let's just do a filtration. I don't think I have a good quality materials library. Let's use my Revit content CTCE, which is where I think all of my image assets are. That is incorrect. I don't know where I put them. Where are they all at? Let's see here. This is, if I go to my details, inside of a content pack, the masonry content pack. Okay, so this is actually owned by somebody else. I'm not actually maintaining this. It's somebody else's library. There is some stuff in staging that probably doesn't belong there. Yeah, so this is all outside content there. So in that case, if I wanted to perhaps isolate this to a particular library, I could include that as well. Or I could simply save this, and of course, just like normal, maybe this is corporate. If I could spell, that would be great. Image assets or something like that. And I probably would want to give it a description and share this with my whole organization and choose which team members can actually find this. So if I have perhaps my architecture team who leverages these, or maybe there is a rendering team or an interiors team that might benefit from this content, I can certainly use my user groups that I've defined in the admin portal and allow them to see this particular search shared among all of them. And of course, I'm going to see it as well because it was something that I authored in the first place. And so now that corporate image assets is available here, it is a shared search that anybody on my team can leverage, and they can run that search whenever they want to, and it will go find those image assets. So it makes that really easy. Now, there was a question that I did see roll through in the questions window. As I mentioned, I answer questions live during these webinars. So that question was, as you make changes or update your content, what actually happens to the content that was showing up in the search criteria? And the thing about saved searches in Revit or in Hive here is that whatever criteria you put, it actually re-executes that search exactly as you would have typed it in. So if I had put something up here like brick and combine that with this and hit apply, when I save that, the next time it gets run, it does the exact same thing. It's like I'm interacting with this, typing it in and running those filters. So as things change, if things would be filtered out because of rules, for example, the updated end date being filtered out, filtering out specific content, then that list will change based on the search criteria each time it is run. So as you take action to repair content, to maintain content, maybe you remove content and you rerun that same saved search, or somebody else on your team runs that saved search, then the results of the search criteria show up. Hive never actually captures the results of the search and represents that to you. It always runs the search afresh every single time it's executed. And so that's a really nice way of making sure that your results are always new, fresh, and ready to go. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the primary presentation today. All right, thank you once again, and we do look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar here with CTC, especially in this Hive Admin Learning Series. We hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.